My best friend of 15 years, Claire Davis, accused me of kidnapping her daughter after I saved Julia from a suicide attempt. I froze. How could someone I trusted more than family twist my love into a crime? Her voice still echoes. She did it for attention. That moment shattered every memory we shared. 6 months later, she stood sobbing outside court, barred from entry, stripped of all parental rights. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. When Claire and I were teenagers, we used to talk about raising daughters over strawberry milkshakes and late-night drives. She swore she'd be the mom who never yelled. When Julia was born, I cried like she was my own. Our girls shared birthdays, sleepovers, scraped knees. Once, Claire whispered, "If anything ever happens to me, you take Julia." I smiled, clueless about the weight of those words. Back then, trust was the foundation of everything we were. After Julia turned 10, Claire began disappearing on trips, sudden spa weekends. She'd drop Julia at our place with a wink, saying, "She's happier with you anyway." Rob and I brushed it off, thinking she needed a break. But sometimes Julia arrived with sunburns or stories that didn't add up. Emma once said, "Julia cries every time her mom leaves." Still, I trusted Claire. We laughed through red flags, blind to the cracks forming beneath our friendship. It started with a late-night call. Julia had locked herself in our bathroom. Sobbing, refusing to eat, I called Claire, desperate, but she silenced me mid-sentence. I just landed in Bali. I held the phone in disbelief. Dr. Chen later said Julia showed signs of long-term emotional neglect. I took leave from work to care for her. Claire never returned that month. KSBS opened a case, and yet, Claire accused me of poisoning Julia against her. Claire posted beach photos while Julia clutched her stomach in pain. I stayed up documenting symptoms, sending updates Claire ignored. Emma asked, "Why doesn't Aunt Claire care?" Julia whispered she feared going back. I tried contacting Mark, her biological father, but he hadn't heard from Claire in years. Still, Claire painted me as unstable. Then she called the police accusing me of abduction. Officer Martinez, after seeing Julia, quietly said, "You're doing the right thing." A wellness check brought KSBS to our door. Julia clung to me shaking. Miss Thompson asked gently, "Do you feel safe here?" Julia nodded, tears streaming. Claire claimed I manipulated her, citing emotional overreach. Emma's recordings Claire yelling at Julia over missed selfies surfaced. Still, some family members hesitated, afraid of rocking the boat. Natalie, my sister and our attorney, urged legal steps. "This isn't friendship anymore," she warned. I finally realized we weren't dealing with a misunderstanding. Julia began therapy. Dr. Chen noted anxiety, abandonment trauma. Claire's only contact, a text, "She'll thank me later." Taylor, Claire's ex, reached out. He'd seen similar patterns. "She weaponizes silence," he said. Meanwhile, Rob found Claire's email to a travel agent: "Cancel Bali if custody becomes messy." My hands shook reading it. We filed for emergency guardianship. Claire retaliated with social posts: "My daughter was stolen." Strangers called me a kidnapper. But Julia's grip never loosened. In court, Claire wore white and wept on cue, but Julia didn't flinch. "I'm safer with Sarah," she said clearly. Natalie presented texts, Emma's recordings, and Taylor's affidavit. Then Mark took the stand, debunking Claire's narrative. He hadn't abandoned Julie, he was blocked. Claire's face cracked. Judge Patel ordered a custody evaluation and granted temporary guardianship to us. Claire gasped outside, reporters swarmed. Julia just clutched my hand. For the first time, I saw strength in her. Claire demanded supervised visits, insisting on her maternal rights. Julia froze when she saw her, clutching Emma's hand. Claire smiled sweetly, whispering, "Tell them you miss me." Julia stared at the floor. Afterward, she vomited from panic. Dr. Chen filed an immediate concern. Claire called it drama. I documented everything, and Judge Patel issued a suspension. Claire shouted in court, accusing the system of bias. But her words felt weightless against the silence of Julia's truth. Weeks later, Claire released a YouTube video claiming I brainwashed Julia and forced her to lie. It went viral in parenting groups. I stayed quiet, letting the legal process unfold. But Julia cried each time she saw another hate comment. Natalie contacted platforms for defamation. Emma posted a TikTok, sharing Julia's real story with her permission. It gained traction, people listened. Claire's narrative began to crack, but I knew another storm was coming. Claire never backed down quietly. The final custody hearing arrived. Claire arrived late, eyes wild, clutching a journal she claimed proved abuse. But it was Julia's sketchbook, pages filled with drawings of our family. "You stole my daughter," she screamed. The judge calmly reviewed findings. Natalie read Claire's airline bookings over Julia's medical records. Claire stormed out mid-session. The court awarded full custody to us. Julia cried in relief. The battle had ended in a courtroom, but the healing had just begun. 2 weeks after the ruling, I found a hidden camera in Julia's room. Panic surged. Officer Martinez confirmed it had been active. The footage led to a nearby motel, Claire's new residence. She'd planted it weeks prior. Julia collapsed in fear. The restraining order was expanded, yet Claire sent letters through third parties, claiming she only wanted to watch over her child. We changed locks, passwords, everything. The feeling of safety vanished again. Claire's obsession had escalated. Rob discovered Claire had impersonated Julia online, using her photos to create fake accounts that spread lies about our family. Dr. Chen noted Julia's spiral nightmares. Panic attacks. Claire's digital trail was undeniable. Natalie filed for cyber harassment charges. The accounts vanished overnight, but damage lingered. Emma stayed close, sleeping beside Julia. Mark called daily now, helping rebuild trust. Claire's manipulation mutated through pixels, her presence lingering like smoke. Julia whispered, "Does it ever stop?" I had no answer. Karen, Mark's wife, unearthed an old email chain revealing Claire's threats to flee the country with Julia if child support increased. It predated Julia's breakdown. Mark turned the emails over. Claire's lawyer withdrew. The pattern now undeniable: years of manipulation, emotional terrorism disguised as motherhood. Julia sat through the hearing with trembling hands but steady eyes. When Judge Patel said, "The court finds continued endangerment," Claire finally looked defeated. For the first time, she didn't argue back. A former therapist of Claire's submitted a letter anonymously. It spoke of narcissistic tendencies, an obsession with control, and a refusal to accept emotional accountability. Natalie verified its source, so the court accepted it into her card. Julia watched silently, her fingers threading Emma's sleeve. Claire's image, the doting mother, the wronged woman, crumbled. Kespia's reopened previous cases Claire had evaded. Finally, Rob said, but victory felt muted. Julia still flinched at knocks on the door. Safety had a cost. An unexpected letter arrived from Claire's estranged mother. She apologized for staying silent, admitting Claire had shown manipulative traits since childhood. She offered to testify if needed. Julia asked, "Did she hurt you too?" The woman nodded, in different ways. That night, Julia drew a family tree, crossing Claire's name out. "I choose who stays," she said. Emma hugged her tight. "We weren't just surviving Claire's damage, we were writing a new story." When Julia authored herself, Julia's artwork began to shift, less shadow, more color. Her therapist noticed. "She's rebuilding," Dr. Chen said. At school, she gave a presentation titled, "What Healing Looks Like." Claire tried to contact a classmate to deliver a gift. The school reported it immediately. The restraining order was extended to 10 years. "She's still trying," Julia whispered. But this time she didn't cry. She tucked Claire's photo into a drawer and taped up a new painting, bright, fierce sunflowers. A podcast reached out, stories of resilience. They wanted Julia to speak. "We hesitated, but she said yes." Her voice shook at first, then steadied. "My mother hurt me, but I'm healing." Thousands listened. The episode went viral. Survivors messaged her. Claire's name became synonymous with toxic parenting. Still, Julia didn't gloat. She painted a tree with roots labeled love. "Boundaries, safety, I made it," she said. That podcast didn't just tell a story, it reclaimed a life. Claire sued for defamation again, but this time she had no legal counsel. Natalie countered with evidence: the cyber skinker, false reports, forged emails. The judge dismissed it in 10 minutes. Claire screamed in the hallway, escorted out by security. Julia didn't flinch. "That's not my mother," she told reporters. "We left through the back," hands held tightly. The news cycle moved on, but for us, it marked the end of Claire's legal power. Julia finally slept soundly. Months passed. Julia laughed more real belly laughs. She hosted a birthday for Emma, painting each guest's portrait. Claire sent another anonymous letter. Julia burned it, calmly. "I control the story now." Rob built her an art studio in the backyard. Karen brought over family recipes. Mark helped with college applications. Each moment, a stitch in something whole. Claire's shadow still lingered, but it no longer loomed. Julia, once broken, was now the architect of her own peace. Julia received her college acceptance, full scholarship for art therapy. "We screamed," she cried, clutching the letter. "I didn't think I'd make it," she whispered. That night, she painted a silhouette, arms raised, breaking chains. Claire tried emailing the admissions office with slander. They flagged it, contacted Natalie. The school stood by Julia. Claire's reach had officially failed. Julia hung the painting above her bed. "Every time I see it, I'll remember what I survived." She was finally free. Claire's final move was mailing a legal threat to my workplace, accusing me of exploitation. Her called me in. I froze, heart racing, but they'd already reviewed the case. "We stand with you," they said. They offered a mental health stipend. Claire was reported for harassment. Julia said, "She's running out of people to light it." That night, we made popcorn and rewatched her podcast. Not as victims, as survivors, choosing laughter over fear. Claire no longer mattered. Emma asked Julia to speak at her school's mental health week. Julia agreed. Her voice broke, describing panic attacks, but she finished strong. "Healing isn't linear, but it's possible." A student approached, tears in her eyes. "You saved me." Julia hugged her. Claire sent another anonymous message that night. Julia deleted it, unfazed. "She's stuck. I'm not." We baked cookies, danced in socks. That kitchen moment, flour and hair, music too loud, felt louder than all Claire's chaos combined. Taylor resurfaced, apologizing for not doing more when he saw Claire spiral. "I believed her lies too long," he admitted. He offered to testify if needed. Julia nodded. "Thank you, but I'm good now." She didn't need revenge, just peace. Taylor donated to her college fund. Claire tried contacting him afterward. He blocked her. "She doesn't change," he said. That night, Julia framed her college letter beside her sunflower painting, two symbols of everything she rebuilt. Julia joined an advocacy group for teen survivors. She led workshops, helping others name their trauma. At one session, a girl said, "You're what safety looks like." Julia cried afterward, tears of relief. Claire sent one final message through a distant cousin, claiming she was in therapy and wanted reconciliation. Julia didn't reply. Instead, she mailed a donation to the advocacy center. Claire's words couldn't pierce her anymore. She chose community over chaos. Her voice had found purpose. Rob surprised Julia with a hand-carved plaque, "Resilient Heart." She cried when she saw it. "I didn't think I'd feel whole again," she said. Karen hosted a dinner celebrating Julia's scholarship. Mark gave a toast. "You taught us what courage looks like." Claire, now silent, hadn't contacted anyone in months. Julia's nightmares stopped. She slept with the window open again. Freedom felt ordinary now. Not a fight, not a shield, just a quiet room, finally safe to rest. At the National Youth Art Gala, Julia's painting Sunflowers in Silence won first place. She walked the stage in yellow, head high, cameras flashed. Emma screamed from the front row. Julia said, "This isn't just mine, it's for every girl who thought love meant pain." Claire wasn't mentioned. She no longer owned any part of this story. We drove home singing with the windows down. Her trophy glinted in the backseat, catching light like her future would. Looking back, I realize it wasn't just Julia who healed, we all did. Claire's betrayal forced me to see the cracks I once ignored. I found strength I didn't know I had. Our family became something chosen, not inherited. Emma stood taller. Rob listened deeper. And Julia, she led us forward. Love, I learned, isn't quiet, it's action, protection, and presence. I held Julia's painting those fierce sunflowers and felt her journey in every brushstroke. The same girl who once trembled now inspired strangers. Claire had tried to rewrite our truth. But Julia reclaimed it with color and courage. I stopped asking why us and started saying because of us. We made it through the fire, not unscared but lit from within, blazing our own way forward. The word family changed for me. It's not just blood or promises, it's who shows up. Julia showed up, Emma, Rob, even Natalie, in every court session. That circle held when everything else broke. Claire taught me what love shouldn't look like. Julia taught me what it can be. Now when I say my daughter, there's no hesitation. Love made that title real. Claire now lives 3 states away under a permanent restraining order. KSBS closed all reopened cases after full investigation finding long-term neglect. Her online accounts are deactivated. She's legally barred from contacting Julia until adulthood. The photo album she once flaunted lie boxed and sealed. The world moved on, but the silence she created is no longer feared, it's peaceful now. Julia started her freshman year with sunflowers pinned to her dorm wall. We video chat weekly, she shows me her sketches, her class notes, her smile. Emma's in theater now. Rob's planning a road trip, and I breathe easier. The household's laughter again. We didn't just survive Claire, we rebuilt in her absence, and it's stronger than anything she ever offered. At Julia's first campus art show, she introduced me as her mom. No hesitation, no glance around, just fact. The audience applauded her piece, Roots Beyond Blood. I cried quietly. That title wasn't just a name, it was a declaration. Family isn't who claims you, it's who chooses you, defends you, heals with you, and we chose each other again and again. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.